We've heard 100 takes about Donald Trump's first 100 days in office, but he's not the only leader in Washington who's under the microscope. So too is Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader who's been criticized by the left, the right, and the center for how he's opposed Donald Trump, and specifically what he's doing and not doing to rebuild the Democratic brand. I caught up this week with Ashley Etienne. She's a longtime Nancy Pelosi whisperer, and we talked about the status of the Democratic resistance.
You gotta light a fire under the party's ass. You have to really focus, get the party to focus.
She knows a thing or two about Democratic politics. Not only did she work with the famed speaker whose political instincts are the stuff of legends, but she's also had stints with Barack Obama, former Oversight Bull Elijah Cummings, and Kamala Harris. And her take on Jeffries? Let's just say, not great.
I can pick up my phone right now. He gave a speech this morning. I don't have any talking points in my phone about what he said. And I'm going to be doing TV in this interview all day. That's a failure. How do you get to discipline if you're not telling people what the hell you want them to say? At least thematically, at least tonally.
More shocking to me, what his own members say about his leadership style.
You know, I really adore Mr. Jeffries. He was one of the impeachment managers when I ran the war room. I have a tremendous amount of respect for his intellect, his ability to message. What I've been hearing from members is that, to sort of sum it up, he thinks too long and wrong about things. That he takes too much counsel and then takes too long to make a decision.
While we certainly geeked out about House politics, our whole conversation didn't just center on Jeffries. We talked about what Democratic kingmakers need to do to win back voters, from building out a better ground game to ditching those silly attention-grabbing stunts that look very desperate. And of course, her frustrations with the lack of 2024 autopsy, which has created a void that has left the party taking contradictory conclusions about how to fix their problems. I'm Rachael Bade, and this is Playbook Deep Dive. Republicans, well, actually, the whole country right now, they're talking about Trump's first 100 days, grading Trump's first 100 days. What grade would you give Democrats on their first 100 days in terms of resisting Trump?
I think I give the party, and this is me being a little generous, I would give the party a C+. There are some things that I think are happening that are right? We have a situation where the Democrats have successfully demonized Elon Musk, created this wedge between Trump and Musk that's been successful in alienating Elon Musk and really elevating some of the dangerous things that he's doing. I think that's working well. A lot of performative things, like from Senator Booker's filibuster speech to this past weekend where Democrats were hosting protests all around the country. So I think the performative stuff is working incredibly well. Also, too, elevating some new voices. You have Jasmine Crockett, Congresswoman Crockett, that's now being elevated. Congressman Frost, that's now being elevated. So we're hearing from new members within the Democratic apparatus that I think is very helpful in attracting new voters, but really making it very plain in a way that we haven't in the past. Now, what I think needs to be improved on is the most important non-sexy aspect of politics, and that is lifting up the hood and creating the infrastructure. And what I mean by that is there are things that we're no longer doing very well, that we have to get back to the basics on, that Republicans are out performing us. And what I mean by that is, one, is we need to rebuild the party at the state level. People talk about old leadership. The old leadership is not in Washington in the Democratic Party. It's in the state parties, the state precinct chairs. We got outpaced this last cycle, which is why Trump won in those 7 battleground states, because we'd not run a ground operation for almost 8 years. So second to that, I would say, is retraining people on how to actually do GOTV and run a ground operation. That's where we always outpaced and beat Republicans. That's always been our sweet spot. This last cycle, we had young people in states that had never even run a GOTV program before. And I think the third, I would say, is the distribution channels. I wrote an op-ed for the New York Times, and I said my advice to Kamala Harris at the time was, you've raised $500 million at the time. take some of that money and invest it in new media outlets, invest it in a paid influencer strategy. Republicans have been outpacing us for years in that area.
Podcasting, that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, back in 2014, I remember when I was working in the Obama White House, and Obama brought in influencers. He was the first to actually, president or elected official, to sit down with influencers. That strategy is so effective at reaching broader audiences and really breaking down complex issues in a way that has resonance with people. So I would say that we need to, as a party, get back to the basics and build the infrastructure. And that's not just at the global level, but that's also what I'm seeing in the House that's not really happening.
So we'll come back to infrastructure in a minute, but I want to talk to you a little bit more about the performative piece.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You think some of them have worked, but there's also been some pretty cringy ones,
Sure.
I would say. All right, well, if we're going to play a little game.
Sure.
To
Okay.
get started, okay? And I'm going to make it a little PG, but we're going to play Kiss, Marry, Kill, Democrat Resistance Stunts Edition. Okay.
Perfect.
You've got, there's been a lot to
Love
choose
this game.
from, right?
Yeah.
Cory Booker, filibuster. Clearly, you liked that one. Al Green at the State of the Union, walking out and bringing up,
Kill it.
Chris Van Hollen flying to El Salvador.
Marriott.
You think that was smart?
I think it was smart. I mean, because the reality is it elevated the issue. And now if you look at the polling, people think that Trump has gone too far in terms of exercising and abusing his power. And I think when framed right, that's what that example drives home in terms of themes, is that Trump sees himself above the law, that he doesn't have to adhere to what the Supreme Court is saying. And the reality is that threatens all of us. And so that I think that particular one, the reason why I would marry is because I think it has legs. And again, it reinforces one of his negatives that we're already seeing in polling.
You don't think that it plays into the hands of a Republican argument that Democrats are trying to protect somebody who came to this country illegally? And I know the merits of that argument. I understand, like, there was literally a court ruling saying he could not be deported back to his home. But is there any concern that, I mean, immigration has obviously been a huge challenge for Democrats. Any concern that could blow back?
Definitely, I think you're always concerned about that. But the reality is I think we need to avoid framing it up as an immigration issue and more as a legal, Trump abusing his power issue. And that reinforces what we were saying about him in 1.0. You know, the president is underwater on almost every issue. But I think what's striking in the polling is how many independents, I think it's somewhere upwards of 70% that that he's overstepping his bounds as the president. I mean, that
reinforces that.
Yeah.
Because it's already a pre-existing narrative. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what you want to do is connect your actions to reinforcing the negatives. The difference is the Trump 1.0, we were trying to convince people that the president was a threat to American democracy. If you look at the polling today, after 100 days, they're already convinced. So all you have to do is continue to reinforce that narrative and then take it to the next step, which is to drive the point that it threatens your own existence, freedom, and liberties in this nation.
Do you feel like there have been any sort of performative strategies or, Democrats doing something to get attention or put attention on Trump that haven't worked, that look just too desperate?
Oh, I thought the sort of 50 different protests during his joint address was embarrassing.
Oh, you're
honestly.
talking about the walkouts and the...
Yeah, I mean, there was like a T-shirt, it was a paddle, it was a walkout.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned Maxwell Frost at the beginning being an up-and-comer, and I was like, I'm pretty sure he led that.
And he could have. I mean, but the reality is, like, you've got to learn when to pull the trigger on some of these tactics, but his voice is valuable. And that's where I think he's an asset to the party.
But that didn't work, in your view, because it distracted from what President Trump was talking about and they became the story? Or why didn't it work?
Absolutely, yes. Because if you look at the headlines post the speech, even during the speech, it was more about Democrats protesting rather than what Trump was actually saying. Yeah. And in those kind of moments, you don't want to become the story. You want Trump to be the story. I mean, that's what we did in Trump 1.0. We hyper-focused on Trump's actions. We didn't talk about Rudy Giuliani. We didn't talk about any of these other players. It was all about Donald Trump and putting a spotlight on Donald Trump and forcing Republicans to own his actions. And I don't think that they effectively did that.
What do you think about things like...
And I also thought it was a problem for Mr. Jeffries. I mean, it really says a lot about how people value his leadership. He asked for no protest. And what did they do? They protest 50
They did not listen.
different ways. I mean, to the point at which it was just an ineffective even protest.
Yeah.
Right? So
I think
that was the beginning of a signal that he might have a larger problem.
We are definitely going to talk a lot about that. Do you think in the meantime, as you wait for that person to emerge, does someone like Ken Martin at the DNC have the sort of reach and the gusto to really like tell people what to do or encourage people to talk more on this, line of messaging? Like, do you think you guys have someone who can sort of help direct coordinate the choir, I guess, at this point?
I think that's such a good question, right? Because the person has to have a level of stature.
Yeah. I mean,
respect.
You mentioned Pelosi.
So
there's no more Pelosi. I mean, she's still around, but she's not leading anymore. So
yeah. And I think, did I tell you this? I was hearing from leadership staff that the leadership on Capitol Hill right now wants to sort of move away from that Pelosi era, that they want to, that they don't want to embrace anyone or anything that's like Pelosi, which I just think is the dumbest SHIT
That's
ever.
crazy, because whether you like her or not, she's a political genius. I mean, she
the baddest in the business.
Yeah.
But but to get back to your question, let's quote Pelosi here: "Power isn't given; it's actually taken." So Ken's got to take the power, and that's what you're not seeing right now among the leaders that actually exist within the Democratic Party, from Jeffries to Schumer to Ken. No one's actually taking the power and taking the mantle to say, listen, we need to go left and not go right. And that's why Pelosi had so much respect. That's why she could pick up the phone. People trusted her judgment.
She earned it, right? Yeah, over time.
Her fundamentals were sound, superior, fundraiser, strategist, tactician. She had it all.
So why isn't the party looking to her more? Like, why not?
I don't know. Maybe the whole party's run by men now, and they're rejecting women and women's leadership. I don't know.
You would think that Jeffries would have her on the horn on a daily basis.
Hello.
Yeah.
I mean, constantly. I mean, you saw that statement she put out around the shutdown. It was clear to me that they had not been engaging her.
Yeah.
And what I was saying around the shutdown is like, Democrats, the win is not shutting down the government. The win is getting something out of the deal.
Yeah.
And every time we were in this position and I worked for Pelosi, she got something. So I'm not sure why they're not drawing on her more often. But it's probably an ego thing. I mean, I hate to say it. And part of the challenge, too, is, people want to establish themselves.
Right.
And how do you establish yourself if you have, and also, too, Pelosi, I can imagine, I've not seen her much since she stepped down. It's hard to be a boss and not be the boss.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's hard to bring somebody like her into the room and she not take over the whole strategy.
So let's talk more about Jeffries, because, he is obviously potentially the next speaker, probably the next speaker.
I hope so.
How do you think he's doing, and what are people sort of whispering, behind his back or behind the cameras? I mean, what is the candid assessment of how he is doing as a leader?
I really adore Mr. Jeffries. He was one of the impeachment managers when I ran the war room. I have a tremendous amount of respect for his intellect, his ability to message. What I've been hearing from members is that, to sort of sum it up, he thinks too long and wrong about things. That he takes too much counsel and then takes too long to make a decision. Which says that maybe you don't trust your gut in the moment, which, is also fair when you're a new leader because you're still trying to figure it all out. It might also suggest maybe you don't have a handle on the caucus, or you don't have a handle on how to actually land some punches on Donald Trump. What I was shocked by, honestly, was when he said at one of his first early press conferences that we're not in control, we're not in power, so we have no power as Democrats. Why that disappointed me was because it said to me that he's not seeking out the answers to that actual question, which is, what powers do I have in the minority?
What can I do?
What can I actually do? When I came back from the White House to run the opposition for Pelosi and Trump 1.0, we immediately started to run investigations. You know that we were working together on a lot of those stories. We were in 23 investigations into the Trump administration, everything from emoluments to the taxes to the Russia investigation. 6 cabinet secretaries resigned in scandal. I mean, we were in the minority active, but what we were also doing was setting up the foundation for the work we would pursue when we became in the majority.
Right.
I don't see that actually happening right now. Here's some of the lessons that I learned when I was running the opposition for Pelosi. One was coordination, discipline, and distribution, the most important things. So when I talk about coordination, we coordinated in her office with the party, with the Senate, with state elected officials, and we formed an inside-outside strategy. And what I mean by that is we were coordinating with outside groups. Think about
Sharing
it.
talking points.
NAACP, LCCR, NEA, pick any group that has like a substantial membership. We were meeting with them almost on a weekly basis. So you're not just coordinating messaging, you're coordinating strategy. You know, it enables you to hit Trump from all angles. We're not David. He's not Goliath. It's not going to be one motherfucking stone, excuse my language, that takes him down. And then you've got an echo of the same themes. You don't have to have a message yet. You got to have themes. Today, the world is more expensive, it's more dangerous, and it's more chaotic under Trump. And Americans are paying the price. Simple. Simple. Everybody say it in your own lane. The other thing I would say I learned is you've got to hit Trump with a level of precision. So again, you cannot, swing at every ball, but when you step up to the bat, you need to hit it all the way out the park. And the way that we did that was we took the chaos and really related it to how it's impacting people's lives on the ground. And it really created pressure on the Republicans in those states. We also ran a regional strategy, which had never happened before on the House side from the Speaker's office or the leader's office. A regional strategy where you're like, I'm targeting 40 districts and I'm going in and I'm only focusing on headlines in those districts. I'm leveraging real stories. I'm leveraging mayors. I'm leveraging we did all of that. That's how we had forced Trump to roll back the first shutdown. The third I would say is you've got to not hyper focus on a message at this point, but hyper focus on developing out a narrative. What are the big themes that Trump is hitting on? And what's happening, and how does each one of these his actions, fall underneath those themes? Then those themes have to align with his weaknesses, what we're seeing in the polls. Hit him on that constantly.
It's like reinforcing that narrative that you were talking about.
People already know it. You don't have to convince them.
Yeah.
All you have to do is keep contextualizing what's actually happening. And I'm not seeing the House Democrats actually set up the apparatus to achieve those things.
Yeah.
Now, we did this in Trump 1.0. I just recently ran into a couple of Mr. Jeffries' top staffers, and I said, listen, you guys should just ask me back. I mean, I don't want to work there, but I'll tell you
how
we did it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was a lot. It had never been done before. I'll tell you how we did it. And the reaction I got was, well, the members don't want any Pelosi, blah, 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 blah. I was like, first off, I've worked for everybody, so I'm not a Pelosi person. But secondly, she's the baddest in the business. We actually landed punches. We actually won 40 seats.
They didn't want you to come in and tell them how to do this.
No, I mean, I'm just surprised that they're not calling everybody that has landed some punches on Trump, asking for the best advice.
Are the outside groups complaining as well?
Absolutely. I'm hearing from the outside groups that no one's talking to them. I mean, the outside groups have asked me, to sort of get into my own business, to come in and set up for them what I did for Pelosi. That level of coordination, the integrated communication strategy. So they're not hearing from Capitol Hill right now. And I think that's a huge loss because, again, Trump is just giving us all this incredible red meat. Incredible. I've never seen anything like this before. It's like the biggest gift any party has been given by the opposition, and we're just squandering it to a degree.
And yet Congressional Democrats polling is just as bad, it seems like, at this point as Trump.
Yeah, I mean, well, I just saw a recent poll which they talked about that more voters are saying they want to vote for a Democrat than they do for a Republican. But the point is, it's not about one election.
Mm-hmm.
Trump may not be running 4 years from now. You're running against an idea. You're running against MAGA. You're running to prove the point that Republicans aren't better at running the economy than Democrats. I mean, like, there's a lot more at stake than just an election and more that you need to organize to actually achieve than just winning the next election.
You were also critical of Leader Jeffries' decision to sort of lean into the shutdown fight. We just talked about this a minute ago. Your whole sort of argument is that when Pelosi would do this, it would be to try to get some sort of concession and win, and that from your point of view, you felt like he was just barreling headfirst into the shutdown, or what was it that concerned you about the way he handled that?
Well, I think the one thing that did work to his advantage is he held the whole caucus. So that was real. I mean, well, I think he lost a couple of votes, right?
He lost one
vote?
I think.
Yeah, one vote.
But well, continue on.
Yeah, so I thought that was really good. Like, if you're going to make a decision, you need everybody to be with you on the decision.
But don't you need a leader to tell the party this is not a good idea? I mean, this is the thing that Pelosi used to do very well. Like, she had the respect of the left, but she also told them when they were wrong or when she felt they were wrong. And I guess the whole exercise, to me, I had to wonder, like, Schumer, he got hit pretty hard, and clearly he didn't handle that as well as he should have. He should have been very clear that shutdown was never an option months ago, right?
Yeah.
But he ultimately said
or at least do what Pelosi would have done, which is like, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. Like, you know what I mean? That's how you get leverage in a negotiation. You don't put show your incomplete hand. And I think both of those leaders showed their hand.
Yeah.
Schumer had to reverse, which is even more embarrassing.
Yeah.
But like, why are you showing your hand?
The reversing was not good at all. But he did.
Okay.
But he did eventually say, we're not going to do this because it's going to be worse if we do a shutdown than anything else.
Sure.
Jeffries did not. And so my question coming out is like, could he even tell the left, no, this is not a good idea? Could he lead them in a way that I thought if Pelosi was in that position and she decided not to do a shutdown, like, forget it. Like, she would be telling people, this is not a good idea. We're not doing this. Or maybe I'm wrong. I'm curious what you think.
It feels like to me the lesson that he's learning is one that I heard Pelosi say quite a bit, which is when you enter into leadership, especially that role, your primary concern is the whole of the caucus and winning. So she's a progressive, obviously, but she would drop that mantle, given her title, in pursuit of winning, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think where he is right now, and again, this is just sort of me being on the outside looking in, is that he's not yet gotten to that point where he understands that he's got to drop that mantle and consider what's important for the whole of the caucus and for winning. I thought, to some degree, the Democrats should have used, on both sides, the funding fights and still going forward to really provoke some conversation, results, traction on their oversight questions. Elon Musk just went to Treasury and the IRS and stole sensitive data, potentially your and my banking information. What the hell does that have to do with cutting government waste? Absolutely nothing. Republicans can never answer that question. Democrats are asking the question, what did Elon do with the data? Using those fights to provoke some of those questions. Like, maybe I'll give you the votes. Maybe I'll keep the government open, but first you got to give me something.
You come in here and testify.
You got to give me something out of the deal. And so, but I think maybe that's the lesson that he's learning right now, is that he can no longer sort of be of any one particular ideology of the Democratic Party, but that he's got to comport himself and function as the leader of the party and do what's incredibly important for the whole. The other thing that I think Pelosi used to do incredibly well is she would leverage the moderate Democrats against the progressive Democrats.
I forgot about this.
Yeah, I mean,
in the
caucus meetings,
the G9? What were they? The frontline Democrats who were military background.
Yes.
The Slotkins.
Yes.
The
Crow.
Yes,
those guys that we used
put them out front to say, hell no, we're not doing this.
to
the
pressure.
progressives. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Because the point is, I mean, where Pelosi would always start is we've got to get to a win.
Right.
That's all that matters. You can say what you want to say about me in your district, long as you win, right? You know, we're going to have to leverage the moderates against the progressives to drive the point that without the moderates, we don't win. Without winning, we don't have the majority. We can't do what we really want to do. And progressives would eventually cower to that argument. They would eventually accept that argument. But
have you seen Jeffries make that argument at all to the party yet? Or maybe he hasn't had to. I don't know.
I've not been in the rooms,
Yeah.
but I've not seen it externally, and I've not heard it internally from folks.
The other thing, though, to be fair to Jeffries, that Pelosi had that he doesn't at this point is this sort of Machiavellian sort of reputation. I mean, as much as Democrats loved Pelosi, they also feared her.
Yeah.
And I don't even think Jeffries wants that. Like, he's not even trying to, scare people at this point. But that in some ways worked a little bit for her.
A lot of it, not just a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember when she was, this is too much.
No, tell us everything.
I remember when she was running for speaker and a member challenged her. It's Seth Moulton, you remember that? And a couple of members challenged her. And, and the strategy was to really go into their own districts, into their own papers, and actually hit them where it hurts. And I just thought that was just gangster on a whole nother level. I mean, I was kind of blown away by it, but it's like one of my favorite characterizations of Pelosi, and this is kind of in culture, was a headline in the Griot. And they called her, oh my gosh, and now I forget it. They called her, they said Pelosi, oh my gosh.
I'm going to look it up right now.
Yeah, I'm like, what was it? Now,
this isn't the Shark Never Sleeps quote, is it?
No, it was, well, they did a couple things. It was like Pelosi per my last email, but it was, Knuck if you buck. That's what Knuck if you buck. I don't know if you know what that phrase actually means, but it's like, if you step up to me, like, expect to get punched back. You know what I mean? In a way that's going to knock you all the way back in a way that you won't even expect. So Griot had this headline, and it's one of my favorite songs, Knuck if you buck.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, but that's Pelosi. And I think you have to have some of that. You have to have some of that. I mean, I thought people feared Obama. What they were most afraid of, not what he would do, but the fact that he had armies of millions of people that were fawning over him. And at any moment, he would be like, listen, I can get my armies of people to come after you. Same like AOC when she came on the scene,
I was going to say, the Democrat that seems to have the most of that right now is AOC, which is not exactly somebody who's going to be telling the party, no, we can't do this because politically it doesn't make sense, right?
True.
Do you think this is just something that comes with time, or does he need to change strategy too? Because, I mean, you'd mentioned when we first started talking about Jeffries that there's a sentiment amongst some members that he takes a long time to figure out what he's doing and sort of talks to a ton of people. I think they see that as a good thing, as in, like, he wants to know what everybody else thinks, and then he decides. I mean, we even see them saying this, we as a caucus are going to decide. And I know Pelosi used to say stuff like that, but we all know who decided.
How many kids do you have? One?
One.
Okay. I have one, too. And I think to run that caucus, you kind of have to be in a sort of parental mode, which is I'm going to listen to what you say, but then I'm going to make the final decision because I know what's best, because I can see the whole picture. You're only focused on District Z, right? I'm focused on winning the House. And so
he's got to be bolder, would you say? And like, do you think he needs to be bolder in making those decisions and telling people this is what we're going to do? Or,
I think he's, in terms of, in a lot of respects, I think he's doing very well. I would just love to see more coordination. I mean, like, I can pick up my phone right now. He gave a speech this morning. I don't have any talking points in my phone about what he said. And I'm going to be doing TV in this interview all day. That's a failure. How do you get to discipline if you're not telling people what the hell you want them to say? At least thematically, at least tonally. Right. And so now Kamala Harris is going to give a speech later today. Is she going to say tonally the same and hit the same themes that Jeffries said today? Are they the same themes that Pritzker hit on Sunday? Now, that's when you're getting to supreme level of communications. That's where you want to be, where everybody's doing their own thing, but hitting the same tonally, message-wise, the same points. And I'm not seeing that actually happen at this point. So for me, it's like, how do you coordinate with the committees better to elevate the work that they're actually doing so people know that we're going after Trump in an aggressive way? How do you coordinate outside of your party, outside of the House Democrats, with the party, the Senate, the state electeds, and those outside groups in a way that creates a chorus and an echo chamber of the same messages and themes? That's how you penetrate. You don't penetrate any other way. If you don't have coordination, you've just got words on a paper that you're calling talking points. But if they're not disseminated far and wide and coordinated across a lot of people, it's meaningless. And I think that's where we are right now. Well, we don't even have the talking points to say that they're meaningless. I mean, that's that's the problem. I mean, no disrespect to anybody. Get the fundamentals together, right?
Call former Pelosi folks back and get them in. Before we center on the House, one thing I sort of don't understand is how quickly the party has sort of gone from almost I don't want to say conciliatory posture, but like right after the election, we heard a lot of Democrats talking about how, this should be a gut check for us. We've got to moderate. We've got to tack to the center. There were some Democrats on the Hill who voted for GOP immigration bills that a lot of Democrats were frankly pissed at them for supporting.
Mm-hmm.
But then within a couple of months, we are back to some Democrats saying, let's shut the fucking government down over Elon Musk,
Sure. Or let's impeach the president.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And it's only been a few months.
Sure.
And so I guess I'm wondering, do you feel like your party is already forgetting this sort of shellacking that happened just, a few months on Election Day? Or what is going on that we have so quickly seen the Democratic Party go from one posture and sort of one takeaway from the election to all of a sudden resistance at all costs?
I think it's because we've not taken an assessment postmortem of what actually happened in the last election, why we actually lost. I mean, there is no memo that I've read that's come out of the DNC that says, here's our assessment of what happened in November. And I think that, minus that, absent that, is why the party looks so disjointed. Because much of this stuff there was already a playbook for. I mean, we built the playbook in Trump 1.0 as a foundation. We've somehow gotten away from the foundation. And I think it's because there is little direction on what actually happened in the last election. I'm not sure why they haven't produced this document. Why would you set up a war room when you're not really sure what war you're in? You've not even talked about what new weapons I actually need for this new warfare. And I think that's why things are looking like a shit show.
So beyond problems with infrastructure in 2024, were there other sort of takeaways you had for the party? Like, was the party talking too much about this and not enough about that? Like, what was your big takeaway?
I think what I've seen, I've spent 20 years doing this work everywhere from the DNC to the White House to the Capitol. I've seen almost every part of the Democratic Party and been involved in it from a messaging perspective. And I think what we do too often is we make assumptions. We make assumptions about voters rather than creating a level of intimacy with voters. Minus an intimacy with voters, you're talking about issues that don't connect. You have a messaging that has no integrity because it's not connected to the ground. I can't tell you, Rachel, how many times I've been on a national presidential campaign sending out talking points, and someone in Texas, someone in Florida, someone in, one of these key battleground states call me and say, I don't know why you guys are talking about this issue. People here don't care about that. We don't care about that particular issue. And voters don't care about it. And it's not having resonance in the frame in which you're posturing it. And I think that's where we have a problem. That's why my suggestion to the vice president and to the party is we need to really create a paid influencer strategy, because the influencers are closer to the pulse of the people than we are. So it creates this two-way conversation where you have the influencer that's talking to their people in their own voice, meeting voters where they are, getting intel from those voters, and then feeding it back to us so that it refines the strategy, the messaging, all of these things. Again, I'll give you a good example: trans issues. I definitely support, believe everybody should have the freedom in America to live their life as they choose. But that was an issue that didn't have resonance with a lot of Black voters. And if you go back and you look at some of the exit polls, I mean, obviously Trump seized on the issue,
Well,
right?
very
And if you go
successfully
back,
so.
and if you go back and you look at, what turned some of those Black voters to vote Republican, it was that particular issue. Civil rights have been sort of a birth off the back of Black people. And so I think we made an assumption that Black folks would support that particular issue, start to finish, stock, all of it. Reality is like it didn't pan out that way. So I think we've got to have a level of intimacy with voters that I'm not seeing it actually happen now.
Speaking of trans issues, we've got to talk about Gavin for a second, speaking of trans issues, because he was sort of crucified for this podcast series he did in a March interview with Charlie Kirk, where he agreed with qualms about trans individuals in women's sports. My reaction to this was actually, how has it taken this long for a very high up Democratic leader to kind of say what I think a lot of Americans are feeling when it comes to this issue in women's sports? But to others, it came across as phony and pandering. What did you make of how he handled that? Do you think that's the sort of tone the party should be taking? Do you think he didn't do that well? I mean, this is, like you said, an issue Republicans continue to harangue Democrats with. And so the question of how the party handles it is obviously something you guys need to figure out for the midterms.
Absolutely. I think I don't necessarily agree with who he brought on and sort of how he rolled out the podcast, but I definitely think it's smart to build your own platform that you can actually control and engage in the conversations on your own terms that you want to.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it's something that the vice president should actually do. President Harris, she should create her own platform. And I would love to see her do it around cooking. She's such a phenomenal cook. It's something that's very close to her heart. I mean, can you imagine if she did cooking and then had kitchen table kind of conversations with real people, thought leaders about what's happening in the world and how it's connecting in people's lives? I think that would be really powerful. But in terms of the issue, trans rights, and any issue for that matter, it's all very specific to the audience that you're speaking to. And I think that's what we've lost as a party, is that not every issue has resonance with every voter. Now, this is another mistake I think we're making, where we're hyper-focusing on the econ message right now. We want to talk about how Trump's failed voters and the American people as it relates to the economy. But what we have to continue to do is to broaden the apparatus of people we're talking to, cast a wider net so that that you're talking about more than one issue that brings more people to the party. And I think that's what Gavin should have done in his podcast. I think that's what he should continue to do. I think that's what the party has to do. But more importantly, I think understanding the audience is very important, which is our failure, because again, we have that lack of intimacy with voters. So we don't even understand our audience.
In terms of connecting with people, it seems that one way Democrats right now are trying to connect with people is to show anger. Right now, it feels like it's very in vogue for, Democrats to sort of curse and get angry. I mean, we hear a lot more F-bombs, I would say.
I agree with that,
than we've ever heard before. Not to say I don't drop them myself all the time, but more than we typically hear in politics. You've got the DNC Vice Chair, David Hogg, calling for primarying of ineffective Democrats. You have Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker talking about do-nothing Democrats and arguing that Democrats are guilty of listening to a bunch of do-nothing political types who would tell us that America's house is not on fire, even as the flames are licking our face.
Sure.
My question is, what do these people want? Do they have a point right now, Ashley, that, there are a bunch of do-nothing Democrats? Or is this type of language suggesting your own party is just sitting on their hands? Is that just sort of pandering to a certain group of people? And is it counterproductive?
Sure.
How do you view this?
Well, I mean, I think at this stage, everybody has a role to play. The challenge, though, is we need to play our part in a very constructive way. And I think firing shots at the party in a way that is not constructive isn't helpful. So do I think Pritzker has a point? I think he's absolutely right. We need to be more engaged. We need to not bend a knee. David Hogg, I completely disagree with. But everybody has a role to play. I mean, the key right now is to continue to galvanize our base, is to keep the base engaged, to let the base know that we're doing something. I would prefer these elected officials, politicians, party officials to really be conveying to the American people what Democrats are doing to fight back, not just challenging the party, not just, undermining our efforts and cursing all this, but really conveying to the American people what we're actually doing to fight on their behalf. And there's a lot that's actually happening.
I was going to say, there's a lot of anger at Trump. Can you direct that at Trump instead of at your own party? I mean, it just seems
some of
counterproductive.
It is, but I will say, Rachel, some of it is helpful. You got to light a fire under the party's ass. Mm. You have to really focus, get the party to focus. But again, it's not these comments aren't, in my opinion, incredibly helpful. Now, what I will say is, to Pritzker's defense, governors, mayors, state elected officials in this time, as you mount a resistance and an opposition, are the greatest assets that we can have as a party. So the challenge for the party is, how do you bring those people into the tent? It's like the LBJ Kennedy line, right? Which is like, bring LBJ in so he's not pissing from the outside in, right? So you got to figure out, how do you bring these folks in, understanding that they're our greatest asset. Why are they our greatest asset? One, they've got the pulse on the people in their state. They can help drive local headlines. They can pressure local Republicans on certain issues. But there's got to be more coordination. And for me, that's what I'm seeing. That's my really gut reaction to all of these remarks, is that we're not bringing those people into the tent. There is no coordination with those people.
This brings us to my next question, which is, who picks up the phone to call Pritzker and say this to him? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who? And you had mentioned to me that you think, there's sort of obsession right now with some Democrats. Who is the leader of the party? Who's the face of the party? And you don't think that needs to be answered right now. But if you don't have someone like that, who is the person? Who should be the person to sort of call up some of these pretty high-level Democrats and say, yes, I know you're mad. Let's direct this in a certain way, or we'll change this to satisfy your concerns. Speak to that a little bit. And why do you think it doesn't necessarily matter that the Democrats, I should say, do not have a standard bearer at the moment?
So who should be calling these folks? I mean, I think it's probably the role of the head of the DNC at this point. So I think the pressure and the challenge is for him to actually pick up the phone and bring these people into the fold. Why don't we have a standard bearer? You're right. I don't think at this point that is necessary. I think the challenge for us right now is to get to building that infrastructure. I think the challenge for us is to build that coordination, the level of discipline. When you have that, you become a nimble operation and you can move anywhere Trump takes you. Now, my advice would be to anybody who wants to be the president 4 years from now is to keep your head down in this environment. What Republicans would want more than anything else is to distract from Donald Trump. You show up on the stage, all of a sudden everybody's firing shots at you. I remember this when I was running communications for the vice president in the White House the first year. Fox News was after her, on her ass constantly on a daily basis. And I saw it sort of force her in her head. It sort of crippled the entire operation for a very long time.
And you think they did that because they believed at some point she was going to be
Absolutely. So they're like, let me dirty her up now. So right now, all we need is for everyone to focus their ire and their attention on Donald Trump. I think the Democrats historically do better when our leader emerges. Think about Bill Clinton. Think about Barack Obama. They came out of absolutely nowhere. Joe Biden grinded it out. I mean, who would have ever thought? But still, he grinded it out.
Yeah.
I don't think people expected him.
No.
But I think that's how it's going to have to happen again. And that's the way I think we should want it to be, because you don't want the person to become damaged goods before it's actually prime time. And I think that's the risk we actually run. But more importantly, the infrastructure and under the hood is necessary so that whenever that person emerges, we're a go. It's go time.
I've already kept you for an hour. I could keep talking about this all day.
We could, yes.
But I think we're going to have to leave it there. Ashley,
right,
thank
good.
you
Thank
for
you
coming
having
on.
me.
Yeah, it's
I
been
appreciate
great.
it. It's
been
fun.
great.
Yeah.
And it's been nice to not, fight about a story for once. So
Or a book.
Or a book. There you go. Thanks for coming.
You're a great reporter. Thank you.